Hi everyone, this is Arpad from the YouTube channel StarPath Academy, and I want to give a quick warning or um, kind of like what I learned from the hyperinflation in Romania and going through the end of communism in Romania at the 80s, end of 80s, early 90s, because a lot of the commenters on this channel, but even on my Patreon group, um, are discussing how they're going to invest in precious metals in order to offset the cost of living and the increases of those during hyperinflation, because these precious metals tend to go very, very high in price during these times, which is true. I lived through that, right? However, I want to give quick warning about the delay between the cost of living going up, the system collapsing, and eventually people figuring out that there's absolutely nothing to be trusted in the past system, and you have to kind of um, use lifeboats, I guess, precious metal lifeboats or some other asset classes in order to save your wealth from the previous system into the next system. So there's a delay between that. And that delay is usually 2 years. It could be also much shorter, but sometimes even 5 years. So we have discussed even the hyperinflation of the Weimar German Republic, right? Before the Second World War. Even then, we saw a decrease of some asset classes that were actually being sold into the market to offset cost of living increases. And that period was almost like 5 years, right? So when people are saying that they're gonna use these investments, whether that's precious metals or stock market gains that they have made, investing in the right utilities or some other stocks or even commodities, right, that have been going up as the inflation kicked in. So you have to watch out because I'm seeing now, especially in Europe, the gas bills and electricity bills being tenfolded in some places. So my relatives there in Romania have already complained, even though Romania has some natural gas reserves, even then the cost of living increases is so high and so sudden that if you are relying on your investments to kind of offset that, you might be actually paying, you might need to actually sell that prematurely in order to continue the lifestyle that you have, right? So you have to watch out for that because if you're investing or you're stacking or you're doing something that might be really good in hyperinflation before we get to hyperinflation, if there would be hyperinflation in our future, you might actually have to liquidate everything prior to that just to survive. So one of the reasons why we talk about so much about prepping or energy prepping or food prepping or some other stuff, even though I'm not considering this a prepper channel, what we have to think about is that you have to take your life necessities first and think about those, how you're going to deal with the necessities of life um, before you think about liquidating your assets or your investments, because there will be a time for that, in my opinion, in the future when those will be in the territory that you would want to sell it and acquire other assets. You have to watch out the time before that and what happens. So think about Poland right now. It's kind of sad to see, right? But they are like lines in front of coal mines that people in Poland went through the collapse of the Soviet Union, so they have good memories, right? Hopefully, they have good memories of how these things play out. And what they're doing now is standing in line, right? That sometimes spans for days in order to get coal that they can burn in the winter time. So these are horrible things, but you have to think about these things. If not, then you might not even make it to hyperinflation with your assets that you're thinking about liquidating then. So just wanted to give this quick heads up, and hope y'all prepared. So I guess if you made it to the end of the video, you should receive a little bit of information about why dictators and despots and tyrants don't necessarily care. In fact, it helps them if there are really harsh conditions in their own countries. And one of the reasons for that is that people have to be preoccupied in order to survive with the basic necessities of life, whether that's high inflation cost, right? The cost of inflation imposed on the population of the countries, whether that's food shortages or lines that you're standing in order to get food, like we did in communist Romania, right? I remember standing in lines with my parents to have food, right? Well, those are actually tools of tyrants that they can use in order to preoccupy the population with the basic necessities of life instead of thinking about pushing for change. And usually when they push for change, it's immediately co-opted into becoming not really a push for change, but quote unquote ask for help from government, which really is the biggest tool of tyrants. So as soon as a smaller group pushes for change, how the system has broken down, another group, probably infiltrated by the tyrants into the group that would like to push change, immediately co-opts that into pushing for handouts, which of course the necessity of handouts is to increase the power of the tyrant even more, because who's going to give you the handout? They themselves. So now you have to give up even more power, and it's a vicious loop. It's a vicious loop down the slope into the abyss of total control. So there's your tidbit of knowledge. See you next time.